Evolve 360, a holistic approach to life, is an exploration of learning through experience to transform individually and culturally as a whole by taking a 360-degree look at our quality of life, including the limiting beliefs, worn-out paradigms, and destructive habits that have led us to where we are today, and to instead create or revolutionize a new life vision that brings greater peace, appreciation, fulfillment, clarity, happiness, and joy as we ultimately evolve. In our last episode, Unconventional Business Leaders, Shelley and I explored the qualities that make a great leader, leading authentically, and how leadership starts with the micro and extends to the macro levels. Hopefully this inspired you to ask yourself, how do I lead my life? In this episode, we're going to take a look at our educational system before COVID, during the pandemic, and what needs to be done to help our kids move forward as leaders of the 21st century world. So let's dive in. Welcome to the Evolve 360 Shelley Shell Show with host
Cheli Grace
and Shelley Devine. Hey, soul sister.
Hey.
I this episode I'm preparing our listeners. We're in Shelley's arena. We're going in deep into the school system. So if you got kids at home, you're going to want to listen to this because she knows her.
Oh, turn it up. Yes, I do. And that has been my passion all my life. Being a teacher, a school principal, helping families and children. And I just love it. You can get me going, and I could do a show for 3 years. I'm not kidding you.
I just have to say, I know I'm going to get educated right now.
Well, I'm always here to offer, advice, just basically let people know exactly the skinny behind the scenes, in the trenches, what really goes on, because a lot of people don't know. They just don't
so
know.
Many people right now, I mean, with this pandemic, they're at home with their kids. They've been homeschooling, or their kids, they shut down the schools,
right,
for the year. And now I know, like, there's a lot of, questions about how this is going to open up again. Are kids going to go back to school? Teachers, have questions. And is this really a good thing, to be bringing the kids back into the classroom? Is it safe? There's all these questions. So today we're going to basically dive in really deep.
We're going to dive in. And here's the thing. There's so much chaos. There's so much chaos in the world to begin with right now with the pandemic and everything that's happened. But our education system was already, I want to say it needed a change. And now there's chaos around that. You've got some teachers unions suing. You have the president of the United States saying everybody should go back to school. You've got superintendents saying, how are we going to handle this? I know that there was a lot of chaos here in Miami-Dade. Our soup finally got on board and said, look, we're starting virtual. We're going to make that decision September 30th. Chicago just took that stand because some states are thinking, well, we're going to do a hybrid. The kids will come 2 days, then they'll do virtual 2 days. But what about all these working parents? And are kids really getting the education that they need? And we're going to talk about that in this show. But before I do, I want to dedicate the show to all the teachers in the trenches out there and those school principals who, let me tell you, you guys are unsung superheroes. You guys are, because what people don't realize, and I can talk about this because I was in education for 35 years, 22 of those as a school principal. The schools are the heartbeat of a community. If you have disaster, the principals are there to help you. Now with COVID, I called my colleagues, my former colleagues, they were giving meals to all the families. They're out there in the community. The schools are opened up for shelters when there's hurricanes here. People don't realize what teachers and principals do behind the scenes to make it work for kids and families. So this show is dedicated to you guys, and let's rock. Let's rock this. I wanted to start and set the intention with a quote that I as I was doing the show, I really got very involved with, you know, everything that I had done in education and where I'd come. And the quote that I want to set the intention with is this: we need to embrace higher ideals to truly change the world. And the only way that we can change the world is through future leaders. And those future leaders are our children. Our children are the angels that are on this planet, and they are the ones that are ready to be taking the charge for the world that we're trying to create. And that's what we're here for. And I just loved the career that I had. It was so beautiful. And, you know, I wanted to tell you guys that I was in a school that was very historic. And I need to go back to our show, Shell, because it's so funny how we say that everything's always connected.
Right, right.
And yeah, Shelley says, well, let's do a show. And I'm like, sure, let me do, you know, we do a lot of research for our shows. Even though I feel that I am a total education expert, I still like to do my research just to get my facts straight. And as I was doing my research, I'm thinking, oh, whoa, here we go again. Yeah. Sacred Contracts of America, back to July.
Back to that. It's hard to believe how this is all.
It's just amazing. So way back when Thomas Jefferson got us in, you know, we created the nation.
Right.
He won. We're moving forward. And he said, one of his, you know, speeches, he says, you know, we need to create an educational system. The nation needs an educational system. Well, let me tell you something. It was nearly 100 years after that statement that he said that Massachusetts finally passed the first Compulsory Education Act in 1852. Can you imagine? 1852.
Took them that long? I mean, they had the school. The school was already there.
They had like the Puritan schools, but it was they taught a lot of things in the schools. They had the one-room schoolhouse, but it wasn't compulsory. Kids didn't have to go to school. A lot of kids were taught at home. But now he's saying, okay, compulsory education. And, you know, when I started looking, I'm thinking, education really hasn't been around that long, formal public education. And by 1918, all American children were required to attend at least elementary school. And that's when the compulsory education law went on the books. Usually it's from the age of 6 to 16, depending on the state law that you have. But in Florida, it's the ages of 6 to 16. And I was a principal. It was very interesting because I was a principal of a school that was built in 1923. So I'm thinking, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah, right.
The law was, you know, passed in 1918. And now, you know, I was a principal for 15 years of a school that was built in 1923. And I'll give you an even stat that's even like more like, wow. I was the 6th principal of that school.
That's it. Wow. Really?
Isn't that, yes.
That is. Oh my gosh.
Isn't that something? And it was just a beautiful, I really had a great time there. And the quote that I created, you know, that we created, Shelley and I created when we were putting this show together, came from the man that he had said, you know, ideals, beautiful things. He created the city that I was a principal in, which was Coral Gables. And way back, he came from Ohio, I believe. His name was George Merrick. Wow. And he was a visionary. And here we are talking archetypal language. He was a visionary and a pioneer.
Yeah.
He went to the school board and he gave the school board $10,000. He loaned the school board $10,000. He donated the land because he was a developer. He was going to develop, you know, people from up north, like you're in Boston.
So this is the philanthropist, the entrepreneur philanthropist too. I mean, like we have 3 of those archetypes playing out in this guy. How about that?
Exactly. So he's up there, you know, and I know that I talk to you in the winter and you're like shoveling snow and I'm by my pool. It's December, January, February. I'm swimming and Shelley's shoveling. So he decided, let me build homes for people to come down to beautiful Florida. And he said, like I said, when we started the show, what do you need to attract a great community? You need a good school. So he says, you know, there's no school here. There's only land. He went to the school board, donated his land, lent them $10,000. And lo and behold, Coral Gables School was born. It was born 1923. And from there, the city incorporated.
Now that's a nice legacy, you know?
It's a great
That's a
legacy.
great legacy of giving back.
He was a great philanthropist.
Yeah.
George Merrick was a great philanthropist. Wow. And what happened, I had the good fortune of celebrating the 90th anniversary of the school.
Oh, wow.
We teamed up with a museum. We did a whole archive on George Merrick and on how the school was born. And the city incorporated 2 years later, because you see, the city was established after the school. And I thought that was really cool. You know, I've learned so much, being there.
Yeah, you're part of that history too, right?
Yes, yes, I am.
That's really awesome.
The first Cuban female to be, the first Hispanic Latina female to be principal there.
Wow.
And the sixth principal, which it was a big deal. And we did a lot of changes. And I love that legacy that I left behind and the experiences that I gathered, because it really made me, a better leader. And that's what we're talking about here. How can we make our kids our future leaders? So, let's talk about that, because education is so broad-based. And I wanted to start with public education and how it came about, compulsory education. And we went back to our sacred contracts of America. And what people don't realize is that the education, it's a business. And
Absolutely.
We're going to get into the dark side here, the dark and dirty. But it's a $600 billion business a year. Okay, wow. Government spending goes to public school. Right. And there's different ways that the money comes. And I just wanted to touch upon that, because a lot of people don't realize how schools are funded. They're funded at the local, the state, and the federal level. And a lot of us have been watching the news, and we've seen the president and how he's been interacting with his governors. Because basically, if we go way back when the 13 colonies were into play, before the American Revolution that Shelley and I talked about in the July show, each of those colonies were like little countries unto themselves. They really weren't like friendly. They didn't like hang out. So think of that in the way that schools are funded, and think of that in the way that laws are created. And basically, governors have jurisdiction over their states. The president and his troops don't, unless it's something that's got to do with federal, which is his jurisdiction.
Right.
So the money comes from at the local level, from our paying our taxes, our property taxes, and other millages and other places, other ways that different cities get their monies for the schools. And then you have at the state level, the money comes from the state. Yeah. And then the federal are programs that are specifically created, such as programs for children that have special needs. There's the federal lunch program where the children have lunch, comes from the federal government. There's different programs. But what's really interesting is that with that in place, you have then the unions. Now, unions have been around for a long time. They were created in the 18th century during the Industrial Revolution. So Shell, I'm so glad that we've done our Sacred Contracts of America in July, because everything is very connected.
Sure.
And it just kind of unfolds from there.
Yeah.
So I'm giving our viewers and our listeners like a history lesson in education, so that you understand now where I'm going with this, because it's really important to know. So the two largest unions that we have here are the American Federation of Teachers, which is AFT, and NEA. And they were put together in 1857 and 1916, respectively. And unions were basically first created like anything, right? To protect teachers out of, horrendous working conditions, just things that were really bad. I mean, I was
that's going to be that's going to be so important right now. And that's probably why the teachers are kind of having a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to getting back to, getting inside the schools with the kids, right?
Yeah. Oh, I know that the teachers that I know, they can't wait to be with their kids. And even some of them were in angst because they couldn't say goodbye. They started the school year. I mean, their kids have left, personal belongings there, because basically, you went home one day and you never came back. I mean, so it's so hard. It's so hard, and basically, I mean, we've come a long way, but if you were pregnant and a teacher way back in the 1916 or 1920, and you were like, you didn't have a job. Like they totally fired you. It was, the conditions were horrible. So we've come a long way. We have basically a $600 billion in government education spending that is funneled, throughout all of the schools in the United States of America. And we're talking public schools. Now from there, we morphed a new entity called charter schools. And those are also public schools. Our state has become a lot more progressive. I know that Arizona was one of the most progressive states in the nation to start charter schools way back in 2001, 2002. And I'll talk a little bit about that because I became a kind of like a media personality, and I started, going on national news talking about the state of education, and I birthed my books because of the law that was passed in 2001. But anyways, as we go along with the union, so exactly, this is where we're at. And, it's so important to make sure that our teachers are taken care of and that they're getting good pay. So the unions they have a lot to do with that, depending on what state you're in. Some unions are stronger than others. I know that Florida is at the bottom of the barrel with the way that we're not we're everyone's right to work. So they don't have to join the union to be able to work. I believe that some states like New York, you have to join the union to be able to work. And if not, you don't have, the benefits. In Florida, I know that in Miami-Dade County, that's not the case. You get
I have
the
no
same
idea
benefits.
what it is up here. I know a few of the teachers have gone back, but I think they might be teaching in private schools.
Right.
So they're calling them back. But other than that, the public schools, I don't know what's going on up here with that.
No, exactly. But let's look at this from an archetypal perspective and from a different plane, because when Shell and I talk about this, you have to look at things from a different angle to really understand the power plays and the energy that's happening. And our education system basically has been the same since 1912, even before that. I know that we used to have one-room schoolhouses with all the kids in one-room schoolhouse, and that has changed. But if we really want a level playing field, and if we really want to grow the future leaders of this country, basically a lot of the majority of our kids go to public school. And with that, now, we have the charter school movement. And that's just an entity of the public school system. Shell, you and I can start a charter school. We just need someone to give us that charter. And usually it's a school system or it's a city that does the charters for those, meaning it's an agreement that you have to meet certain standards for the kids and the curriculum and the teachers, but you're not held to the same level of, I'm going to use the word loosely, dictatorship as the public school system. So you have a little bit more leeway. Exactly. And then, of course, we have all of our other schools, our parochial schools, our private schools, our independent schools. You have so many different schools. And if parents have the means to pay for their kids to go to these schools, it's great because then you have that availability. Now you even have virtual schools. And I know that, where I'm from, we have virtual charter schools and we also have virtual district schools. So there's a lot of different variety of choices for parents. But when I wanted to kind of share with everybody that a little bit about,
what about your history? Like your history with the education and school. Like,
my history with education.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because when I had wanted to always write a book because I felt that a lot of times I had met so many great leaders in the education system and they retired. And once they retired, they left with all this wonderful knowledge, historical. And, you talk about leadership and great leaders that leave a legacy behind, but a lot of times it's not recorded. So I thought, how can I help parents? So way back when, and this is a great segue into No Child Left Behind.
Right.
Yes. I don't know if people remember, but George Bush was the governor of Texas and he was running for president. And what happened was that he became elected January of 2001. And shortly thereafter, in 2002, they passed a law called the No Child Left Behind Act, which is under the elementary and secondary act of this nation. It's a huge, big deal. And what does that mean? It's like, okay, so it's another law. Yeah, it's another law, but it's the way that our kids were going to be taught, the curriculum that was going to be administered. But most of all, it was the testing that went alongside of it, because a lot of people don't realize that, all these things are in play, but it's about our kids, and we have to keep the kids in the forefront. Mm-hmm. So what happened there is, and I was able to realize, because I was a parent and my kids were little, mm-hmm. and I was a school principal, and I'm thinking, wow, this law is so confusing, because all of a sudden school choice came into play. That's when charter schools started coming up.
Right.
And I'm thinking, wow, if I'm a school principal, I've got 2 kids that are in the elementary school, and I have all these choices, and I am in the trenches, people. I am there working every day. I know the laws, I'm part of committees and teams that I was put on. And I'm thinking, if this is hard for me, I can just imagine like a regular parent that has no, their career is not in education. Their career is in something else.
Yeah.
So I wrote a book on school choice, and I started doing things for parents and giving information with my first company, that they could go and they could find out what's the best school for their child. How can they navigate this law? And then, from there, then the other books that I birthed came out, which was a school talk series, because I wanted to share with parents kind of like Q&As. Because again, education is it can be very difficult. If you have a child with special needs, if you have a gifted child, and we've talked about that friend of ours that had, that gifted child, she's brilliant and she's doing fabulous.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, if you're average, you'll do great. But what is average? Everybody should be held to a higher standard. Everybody should be treated as a gifted child.
And I think they kind of leveled the playing field in some areas, because they didn't, they started to teach everybody at the same level. So if you were gifted, you couldn't, get like, extracurricular stuff. The teachers would, at the time, keep you at that level. And so you kind of were like, okay, kids would get bored with school very quickly. And not want to stay, especially as they got into the higher education of, high school and stuff, and trying to keep your kid in high school. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like right now with parents having to deal with some of the issues that are going to be, that we're moving through or towards right now, because this is a huge topic
it's a huge topic
for what's coming into play with the young ones coming up through kindergarten, preschool, elementary school, as well as into, middle grades, and then into high school. I mean, I just don't even know how they're going to go through this with the charter schools or the public schools. Private schools, a whole other matter, because that comes out of the parent's wallet, and they can pick and choose. Sometimes you got to actually, apply for those schools. I know, you had touched on Boston Latin as being one of the first schools in this country, and you have to excel as a student to get in there. You have to qualify. You have to go in. Is this what your books were about? Teaching parents, okay, your kid, you have to prepare them to take a test. They have to go in and interview. It's just like getting into, as they mature and they get into the real world. They have to do the same things. They have to, fill out a resume and apply for a job or something like that. They have to know how to speak. They have to know how to answer questions. Well, it's the same thing going to these other types of schools that aren't just public schools. Right. Public school doesn't offer that. And I think, in some case, because it's just like, okay, you could just go to your neighborhood school. Right. But I don't even think it's going to be like that anymore,
Right. There's a whole school choice movement, and I worked in Miami-Dade County, which is the 4th largest school district in the nation, and they're very cutting edge. Yeah. We had specialized schools for kids on the elementary level, like we call them magnet schools. But my books basically were telling parents, look, it's great that all these schools and choices are out there, but what is your kid like? What does your kid want? Yeah. Because in my experience, I had parents that would stick their children in an international language school, and the kid hated it. Yeah. He was miserable. I mean, why do
Yeah.
that to your kid? You want to incite creativity, and you want. I would tell parents, look, if the worst thing, and you're a mom too, so is the alarm rings at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. You got to get your kid up, and the kid doesn't want to go to school. Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
I mean, just like that's the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah.
If your kid doesn't want to go to school,
because I mean that's where their friends are. They want to.
Yes.
I was up at the crack of dawn when I was a kid ready to go to school.
I know, right?
My parents crazy. But when I got to high school, I was towards the end of it. I was like, okay, I've had enough. I graduated early and got out early in high school, and then went on to college. Like I had a big gap in between. I had a lot of time off before graduation, the actual graduation in June, and then the following September going into college. But today kids, I mean, this whole virtual thing that's going to be coming up, and how we're going to navigate that. And then too, teachers, getting back to, keeping our educators healthy and safe too. Should we be making them, especially when they have little ones, taking temperatures every
how are they going to do
three
that?
times a day or 4 times a day? And then are these kids, sitting confined wearing masks all day? Like, is that going to be?
I can't even begin to think how a 5-year-old is going to be able to do that. It's going to be challenging.
I just don't know. And then as a parent, is that really what we want for our kids? And that's what that's why we're doing this show, is to discuss these things. And
to discuss curriculum, because to me, I'm a curriculum person.
Yeah.
It's how we learn. And we were talking about that.
Yeah.
Because basically reading is reading and writing is writing. And math is math. And I wanted to share with parents, because a lot of people don't understand how everything came into play. Yeah, COVID's another ingredient in this flame of fire that we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's just another ingredient, but I think COVID has made everybody take a step back and think, how is the best way to teach our kids? Because way back when, before No Child Left Behind came into play, every state took care of their own curriculum. And it depends on the movement, because to me, education curriculum is like, what's the next flavor? So the movement way back then was, at one point, and we talked about it in the 70s, it was whole language.
What the heck
That's when people said, oh, I don't want little, Mary Sue having to worry her little head in spelling or, doing grammar. She extemporaneously let whatever comes out of her heart come out. But then what happened? We created a whole, culture of kids that a lot of them didn't know how to write correctly, and we had to fix that. So all this curriculum has come out of this. To me, the best way to teach a child that's little is phonics.
Yeah.
Spell it out, reading the alphabet, phonics, because that way you can always determine. Now, if you're an adult, or if you have a child that comes from another country, absolutely, there's other techniques. Yeah. But you don't do that with little kids. You need to give them good foundations.
I know. I found like those sorts of things become confusing. There was something recent, even more recent, with math and how they were teaching math. And I can't even explain it. It was so bad.
Don't get me started, because I'm going to talk about that.
And what was really annoying is if that's what they were teaching kids in school, and meanwhile you're going down to the grocery store and the kid can't do math at, like who's at the register, and can't do the math of counting back your change. That's annoying, because your tax dollars are paying for that baloney. And I was like, what? I don't know what states did that, but I can remember seeing, and there was like,
when was that, Shell? Do you remember?
I don't remember. It was some weird math thing. And it was like, probably kids in high school or something had to do it. And they might've been, the word problems or something. And you'd have to come up with this. And the numbers, I could never figure it out. I was like, are you kidding me? What is?
Oh, I got the answer to that, because I know how that happened.
It was a bunch of baloney, and there was never, you could never get the right answer. It was just this kind of like this weird kind of, if you put these, I don't even know. I couldn't even explain it. And I'm like, thank God my kids weren't in school during that time, because I would have flipped a nut if that was being taught. would have flipped a nut. I would have been.
All right, so let's talk about flipping a nut, okay?
Yeah.
Let's talk about parents, and let me tell you something, because
And
people
can
don't
imagine they
realize
must be.
how curriculum, what do we teach our kids? And that's what this show's about, growing future leaders.
Yeah.
So you talk about that mapping, and that's really, really important. And why is it? Because people have to realize that the education in this system has become extremely political, and that's the biggest problem that there is.
Ooh.
So let me go way back.
Wow.
Right before Jeb Bush started, becoming our president, our 43rd president. So he gets elected, he's the governor, and all of a sudden he says, okay, I'm gonna, pass this law called No Child Left Behind. I was a principal at the time, and basically what it said is that by a certain time, I think it was 2010, all kids were gonna be on the same level playing field. Yeah. Basically what they said, no, it was really a crazy law. So yeah. They wanted high standards, great. They wanted to make sure that kids were reading in 3rd grade, which is extremely important. And we're going to talk about that one, because I have a riveting statement regarding 3rd grade reading, and don't make me forget.
Okay, I won't. We'll go back. We'll circle back.
Right, we'll circle back. So No Child Left Behind started, and basically, remember, before No Child Left Behind, the states were left to run their curriculum. Every single state had their own state tests that they gave the kids. I know New York was one of the ones that they had, I believe it was called the Rutgers exam or the Reuters exam. I don't know. I'm from Florida. So basically that was it. Every state did their thing. So it wasn't really a level playing field, because if you said, oh, these kids did really great in this state, it wasn't. So that's what they were trying to do. So they started putting this together, and it was basically to make sure that there was a uniform curriculum, and that kids were going to be tested again in reading and math in grades 3 through 8, and then once in high school. So that's how it came into play. Then his brother, Jeb, becomes governor. He gets reelected for a 2nd term. So now you have the president, Bush in the White House, and Jeb in the state of Florida. So I was part of that No Child Left Behind program in Florida. So I talk about Florida because I know it wasn't going on in other states. All of the states, 46 states enacted this law. Right. And what happened was now, and Florida's always different because we always have to come up with something. So instead of No Child Left Behind, it was called the A+ Governor's Plan, meaning that now not only were the kids going to be tested, but our schools were going to be graded. Imagine if you were a good kid, got basic A's, and you were attending an F school. How do you think you'd feel?
Yeah, not good.
No, it's horrible.
There. Yeah.
It's horrible. Yeah. So that was his plan. So basically that went on for a really long time. No Child Left Behind went on for a long time. And then somebody, the education powers that be said, okay, let's change things again. And in 2009, the states started this effort of Common Core. And that's where I believe your math problem comes in.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden they're saying, we're looking at this No Child Left Behind, and kids are still being left behind, right? And now let's come up with Common Core, which was a curriculum. Okay, everybody has good intentions, but my thing is, get the teachers that are in those trenches teaching those kids, making these decisions, not some politician or somebody that's been so removed from the classroom that they don't get it.
Right.
So now this Common Core comes in, and yes, they have you prepare, but there's a reason why it failed, and I'm going to tell you why, okay? Especially, I remember when I was in the trenches, the books, remember when you have a new curriculum, think of your kids when they went to school. All the books have to be redone. The teachers have to be trained in how to do the delivery of the curriculum, how to teach it, and it's a huge undertaking. It's chaotic. I'll tell you an inside skinny story of my school and my fabulous teachers, because my teachers were really awesome. I was very blessed. So I had this one teacher, and she was amazing. She could make anybody read. Actually, it was 2 of them. Older kind of teachers. Everybody looked up to them. They were like role models for everybody else.
Yeah.
And at the time, my school wasn't as big as it was when I left, because we expanded it on 2 campuses. I only had the 1 campus at that time, possibly maybe 900 students at the time. I had maybe 50 teachers. So she comes up to me. We do this whole in-service, just made it as easy as possible. We'd give them cheat sheets. We do everything for them to understand what they had to do, the new curriculum. My teachers were really smart, but they were confused and they were tired. Okay. They were tired. They wanted the best interest of the kids at, always. So she comes up to me and she says to me, I don't know if I could do this. Now, granted, this is one of my really all her
teachers.
She was in third grade. She could make everybody read. Third grade.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, holy moly, if she's telling me that she's having a problem with this, right? And it's like, so this is a good leadership question for those leaders and those principals that are listening, right?
Yeah.
So I always said, I always had my pulse into what's best for the kids through my teachers. So I said to her, okay, this is what we're gonna do. You make sure you understand everything that they want. And when you close that door, honey, you teach, teach, and teach. And I had the highest reading scores in third grade that year. Yeah. Why? Because I said to her, I totally get it. Reading is reading, people. You don't change reading with a curriculum. Yeah. Phonics. All right. Put your words together and sound them out. Let's teach kids that.
So
they had all these rigmarole things.
She had some backbone. You had some backbone and said, yeah, we're not going with the status quo.
No.
We're going to do the way it should be done.
Because here's the problem. You go with the status quo and what happens? You tank. Your scores tank. My scores went up because I supported my teachers. I made sure that they understood what was in the fold of the new. But it was chaotic. Our books came late. I mean, the teachers were struggling. We were calling other schools. They were going to other schools, calling friends that were, trying to get copies, the extra book to, hey, can I borrow 2 books? When ours come, I'll give them back to you. That's how teachers survive. People have no idea what they do to make kids learn.
Yeah.
So anyways,
the experts. It's like they are the experts.
Yes.
To be told by somebody who, like you said, hasn't been in there for a long time, and
politicians
doing, rolling up their sleeves and actually doing it.
In fact, we used to crack up because we'd say, I wonder if some of these politicians that passed all these laws could pass any of these tests. And with Common Core, Shell, let me tell you, the math was totally flipped on its head.
Yeah.
Because it was a whole new math concept, a way of thinking. They wanted the kids to think in a critical way, but math is math, people. They came up with this whole different, I couldn't even help my kids with math. Thank God they were already out of the school.
Yeah.
But I had parents that were educators that would come to me and say, I cannot sit with my kids at night and help them do their math homework because I don't understand this. Just like you said, I don't understand this.
Yeah.
And
it made absolutely no sense. And and the thing, Shelley, the thing is right now, how this is kind of a funny little thing is, sometimes on Facebook, they have these math problems. And it's there was one recently that went around and it was a bunny saw 3 elephants go to the river and the elephant saw, 9 monkeys. How many animals were in, that's how it went. And I can't tell you how many people have gotten that answer wrong. And I actually got it right, but it was there was critical thinking in that, but it made sense. And I'm thinking, if I can do this, then how come I couldn't do that thing back when the kids, because I think I can think, and I usually do well with those, tricky.
Girl, you're smart. You're an entrepreneur. You've had your company very successful for many, many years, but that math that was being done way back, I was like, I don't even know. And I felt bad for the kids. I was like, are you kidding? It's hard. Yeah. Well, imagine being a parent. And I mean, I know a lot of smart people. We're smart and not being able to sit with your kid to help him do homework because you just don't get it.
Yeah.
It sends a really bad message. So I don't know who came up with this stuff, but it's just, to me, let's just keep things simple. Yeah. Let's give kids, what they need to get. And let me tell you, I told you not to get me going. Yeah, but there's so many things that we're not teaching our kids that should be taught in the school.
Yes.
At a young age. Yeah. At a young age.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is that right before COVID hit, our governor rescinded Common Core. He said, enough of this Common Core, we're done with it. And what I love about Florida is they're like the power players because we never called it Common Core. We would call it Florida Standards.
Oh, geez.
You know, they had to have a different name.
Yeah.
Okay. They're just so funny. So now check this out. We have a new curriculum. So not only are the teachers in COVID mode, not only did Common Core go out the window, and this is this year, there's a new curriculum. And I'm sure they're in a transition phase. And that new curriculum is called Committed to Eliminated Common Core. It's called Florida's Best Standards. And it stands for Benchmarks for Excellent Student Teaching. And I was listening to some of the conversations that our Board of Education had. And they're like, this looks like Common Core, but kind of like on its side.
Like,
so
wrapped different and
wrapped differently.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, let's just get back to teaching kids how to read with phonics and do regular math.
Yes.
You know, with the abacus. I mean, it worked, you know, like kids learning, you know, like how to count and then putting them together and then, you know, get into algebra, geometry and trigonometry and calculus and all that the way it was normally done.
And here's the thing, because like I said, I've been in education for a really long time. And unfortunately, a lot of our school systems haven't been able to keep up with technology. And the teachers haven't been able to keep up with technology. So my thing is, why don't we just put education on its head? And let's bring in something really new and effective. There's things that we should be teaching our kids when they're little. One of them, which I'm very, very passionate about, is public speaking.
Yes.
Our kids need to learn how to do public speaking, debates.
Yes.
Remember when you were in high school and we used
to have debate, like debate.
That's part of it.
And there was, I remember my kids, which we didn't get, was that public speaking. You had to do like I forgot what the term that they used, but they had to get up like probably once a week and stand before their whole class. Right. And do, you know, a talk on something. They had to get dressed up in a suit.
Yes.
Or a dress. They had to be very formal, and it was a public speaking thing, and they had to do it regularly. And that's like anything that you train for. The more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah. But public speaking, because kids need to, like adults, you know, not to ramble, speaking on point, you know, what's your key point? What do you want to say? It's so important. That, and the other thing that we really need to teach our kids at like when they're 5 years old and build from that, besides public speaking, is fiscal responsibility. Kids today, they don't know how to budget. They, you know, they don't know how to handle money. Like you were saying, you went to a store and they gave you the wrong change.
Well, didn't they take away all those, like, I mean, we had home economics, and I can remember learning how to balance a checkbook in school. It was a course, but I don't think my kids, they might have gotten that in school. I never remember them taking a course, but I remember taking a course like that. And I don't know if they offer them today.
I don't know. Let's see what happens with Florida's Best. I know that when I was in the trenches with Common Core and No Child Left Behind, we didn't do any of that. We were innovative. What I did was I partnered up with a bank, and we had a bank program at the school that was really cool.
That's cool.
My kids were little like bank tellers, and once a week, you know, that you can come and put your deposit in. And then it was really a great system and a great program. And it taught the children how to save money. Parents would, you know, you can even go to the bank, but things have changed tremendously. Yeah. But what I want to throw out there to the viewers and the readers is that we've got to start thinking about better ways to educate our kids through, you know, case studies, internship programs, you know, bring the classroom out of the classroom, go out and give them real world experiences. Because when you have a child that doesn't, you know, is gifted or has a special need, how are we going to take care of these kids? What skill sets are we going to be giving our children so that they can become leaders? Everybody can be the leader in their own way. What employability skills are you going to give them? Not everybody. And now college, you know, now they're saying that we're not really going to be going through 4 years or 6 years. It's going to be more like certification specialized programs where you can go in for a year or two. And some of these people are making more money than a college, you know, someone who has a doctorate.
Right.
So that's what we have to start thinking about. What are the different ways? But one thing I really want to tell everybody that's out there is we need to be very careful of who we put into office and who we elect. And I always used to tell my teachers that. I would tell my teachers when the legislative session started, because this is where all the laws are passed. And a lot of times people don't understand this, but they're done at the 11th hour. You know, they're done when no one's looking, and they throw in something that really deals with
yeah. Yeah, they sneak it in. They sneak it in.
What would we call that archetypically? Like the dark judge or something, huh?
Something totally sneaky.
Oh, sneaky. Yeah. And I would say you guys need, because, it's never going to happen to me. You know, well, a lot of things happened. And it's important because, again, people are making decisions and have no clue how children learn. Right. And it's so important to have people making those decisions.
And if we all remember, like back when they were picking Trump's cabinet, and there was that one, I can't remember what her name was, but she was going to represent education. And I can remember.
Secretary of Education, yes.
Yeah, I can remember thinking, good Lord, we're in trouble. And I can't remember her name.
She didn't come from public. She came from, I believe, private
schools, but her attitude towards education. My kids went to private school, you know, so I get that. But the way she was talking, she was so out of touch.
Betsy DeVos,
with education and I don't know if she got in or not. I don't think she did. But
she is. She's the Secretary of Education.
Okay, so and I was
Betsy DeVos. Yeah, she's in. Arnie Duncan was the one that was before her, and I thought he was really cool because he was a cool guy. He'd been a principal. I don't know if Betsy has that, and that's the thing when you get people into those offices, you need people that have been in the trenches. Yeah. You don't, and especially if we're talking about a position like that. Yeah,
because
that's a really big deal.
What you had touched on is you have all these different, things that kids and parents are dealing with. Like say you have a kid that has special needs. That's a whole other.
Oh, it's so hard.
And you want, I want that parent to have the best for their child education-wise. And if they don't, because the programs aren't available, especially now that's got to come into play now that, and the parent has to be home with the kid or.
I don't know how they're making out. It's so hard.
Yeah, I can't imagine. And then too, just, your regular kid that goes in and needs whatever. And then the advanced kids, whatever. It's like, how do we, there's so much variety here.
Yes, there is.
And
I always used to tell parents that if you do have a child with special needs or, even gifted, you have to shop around because the public school system, I know, and I speak for Miami-Dade County. Yeah. We have a very cutting edge system. Yes, it still could use a lot more, revamping like what we're talking about for 21st century learning. Right. But basically you need to do your research. And a lot of parents, because of whatever reason, that's why I was so compelled to write my books, because I wrote my books to help parents navigate the educational system. And it was a school talk, how to talk to a principal, how to talk to a teacher, what questions to ask if your kid is having this problem, because of the fact that it became such a huge undertaking that I took on a co-author to help me basically write those situations, because she was also a principal from a charter school. And I said, I'd like to get that perspective too. Yeah. So we put that together. And a lot of times I was not a traditional principal. I was very, very passionate about my parents and making sure that my kids, would get their help. And the laws have changed so much now. Yeah. And a lot of kids that need help are not getting it, because of the laws that were passed with No Child Left Behind and Common Core. You'd have to go through a whole step. And I get it, people. I get it that those of you that are out there that are psychologists, and I get it. You don't want to label a child. But here's the thing. Here's the flip side of that coin. If you have a child that has a problem learning in school, the fastest way to nip it and to give that child help is when they're little. Yeah. Yeah. I retain kids. Like it would be a team approach with the teacher and the parent. But to me, if you're 5 and you're not doing well in kindergarten, maybe you need another year. Yeah. Maybe you need another year. Why pass that child on? And maybe in 3rd grade, and we're going to talk about the riveting
Yeah, you
riveting
should.
info that I
Yeah,
have
the third
about third
grade
grade.
reading test or whatever. What the heck?
Maybe
is
in third
that all
grade, that
about?
child, and let me tell you, our state passed a law that if you didn't pass the state exam in third grade, you were going to get retained. You wouldn't go on to fourth grade. Can you imagine being 9 years old with all your buddies and all your friends, and all of a sudden you get left behind?
Yeah.
That is horrible. Talk about totally squashing a child's soul for life.
Yeah, self-esteem,
Totally.
everything. Yep.
Totally. So are you ready for the riveting statement that I'm going to make?
Yeah.
Okay, so the riveting statement is this. Now, remember, and when I was doing research, because I always like to do current research, it's funny that I saw it all out there, but now,
Yep.
and Shell, I start thinking, I wonder, you wonder. I wonder what's up with this, because the research says that it's now an urban myth. An urban myth. That's the word that they used.
So it's
like
like they're saying it never really existed, this test.
Exactly. So let me tell you about this little urban myth. So we have a test in the United States called NAEP, the National, I should have Googled it's an acronym. I'm going to tell you right now what it is, because I like to tell people basically what these things are, because in education we have our own language, just like in any other industry.
Mm-hmm.
So NAEP, N-A-P-E, is a national test that's given out to schools, and it's the National Alliance for Partnerships in Education. Okay, National Education Foundation. So NAEP is it basically comes out of Washington, and basically they get what is called the nation's report card. They have a pulse on the state of education in this country. And way back in the 60s and the 70s, we were pretty good into what we were doing. But then what happened, that's why a lot of our kids and we weren't really putting a lot of emphasis on math and science.
Mm-hmm.
So now there is more emphasis through something called STEM, which is the STEM curriculum. It's education for math and science. So long story short, third grade, to me as an educator, I really feel that children should be learning, they should be reading by first grade. If they don't read by first grade, parents, if you have a child that's not reading by first grade, you need to take a notice, and you need to reach out and get help from your school system.
Yeah.
Your school, because here's the thing, okay? Third grade is a critical grade.
Right.
So they realize this, and one of our fabulous politicians, who I know personally, passed this law way back in Tallahassee, which is our state capital. And he said, any child in third grade that doesn't pass this reading test is going to be retained. It's going to be held back. So what happened was, all of a sudden, the urban myth that used to, I don't know, I thought it was truth. They say, okay,
this is crazy.
They base their third grade reading scores on a formula for all the children that are not doing well in third grade and don't know how to read. They base that on how many prisons they are going to be building in the future. Isn't that horrible?
That's crazy.
Oh, that's really crazy. So back when I was in the trenches, and I've been in the trenches since 1980, a long time.
Yeah.
To 2018 when I left.
Well, look at how many prisons we have now. I mean, like, we do have a lot of prisons.
So I'm doing research, and it's like, oh no, that's an urban legend. It was written up in Education Week, but that's now an urban legend. It's a myth. It's really, that doesn't really happen. So I'm thinking, I wonder, right? I wonder. So wanted to throw that out. And also, before we leave the show, I want to leave with the parents with a couple of other little tidbits of inside the trenches things to do if you're having an issue or a problem. Because now that I'm out and I don't have to really, watch my P's and Q's, I'm all out there to help parents and to help the kids.
Some pretty situations where, kids were jeopardized by, you've had to deal with and navigate some hefty things during your years. And it's like, I mean, I can't help but wonder, now, say principals or school teachers if they're not even in, say, if they're doing virtual classes, how are they going to really be in touch with those kids and actually be able to know if something's not right at home?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, because the other day, Redfield, who is the Surgeon General, I believe, Dr. Redfield, he's up there with Fauci and everybody else.
Yeah.
And he was doing, an interview, and basically what he said, and that is so true, because when I started this show, I said to everybody, he's a virologist, and he is current director of the Centers for Disease Control. That's Dr. Redfield. But he said something very profound that I said when I started the show, and that is, the schools are the heart of our community. That is where people go to find answers when there's problems, right? The schools we are the glue that keeps the community together. So what happens is, and I'm glad you brought that up, Shell. What do kids go to school? They have their teachers, they have their school counselors. School counselors are so important in a school, because what if a kid is getting abused at home? Who do they go and tell? And what he said was so heartbreaking, because our kids aren't in school. A lot of kids are committing suicide, or they're overdosing on drugs.
Yeah.
They're
and
overdosing.
How, and if parents are so overtaxed with, both working, maybe they're working from home, but still, they're trying to, there's so many things that this COVID thing has brought into place. People don't know if they're going to have a job next week.
I know.
Because, businesses have been closing, and with this new election coming up, we haven't seen the whole ramification of what 3 or 4 months since COVID hit this country, the ramifications it's going to have economically to our education system as well. And then too, young kids coming up who aren't going to be potentially socialized too, with other kids. And
is a big concern, because that's how we create our personalities, and that's how you interact.
Yeah. And so the issues that even teachers are having now, where in the news you see teachers are, I don't know if they're kind of like saying, I don't know if I want to go back. They really want to, because that's their chosen profession. That's what they went to school for. They love it. But they're having some doubts about how to go about this, and how they're being maybe forced to go back to the schools themselves. In public education, private, that's a whole other ball game. I think some of those teachers, especially in Mass, they're actually, gearing up to bring the kids back into that fold. But how they're going to do it, are there going to be these hybrids that are going to come up? Where some of the kids are online, they're getting trained, and then they, taught, and then they go to school maybe some other days. Maybe they're not doing a full week. Maybe they're just dropping in. But how does this play out for parents? Because parents have to make the choices of, what am I going to do with my kid all day? How am I going to go about that?
You're right. And it's so hard working from home and having a child that wants you to play with them, or having a child. I've called companies, and my heart goes out to these women, and I'm like, hey, how are you? You could hear the kids screaming in the background,
Yeah.
You're
like 24/7 now, man.
Oh my gosh. Yes. It's like, my heart goes out to all the working parents right now that have these kids at home and might not have other means, maybe to give them some help, maybe, extended family members or what have you.
Do you have any ideas, after all of your experience being, as an educator and being in that realm, of, do you have any, like, this is the direction that, like, our government should be going in, and the states should be going in, and the town should be going? Do you have any idea of maybe what they should be looking at to start that process from elementary school up to, what could parents be looking for right now, especially in what is currently happening? Do you have any idea?
It is such a hard situation that we're in because we've never been in a pandemic. I mean, I went through a devastating hurricane in Miami-Dade County. I was already an administrator back in 1994, which was Hurricane Andrew, that devastated, it annihilated the entire Miami-Dade County.
Wow.
And, you know, we made a lot, but, you know, a pandemic, it's something that's so, I mean, horrendous. So to me, I mean, we need to teach teachers. I mean, I just can't even begin to imagine. And I've had this conversation of being a principal and being in charge of a school where now you have children coming back during a pandemic. What safety protocols need to be in place? You know, we were all very well versed in crisis plans, but now you have, is a teacher going to be taking the temperature? You know, are you going to have hand sanitizers everywhere? The distance. And kids are social beings, you know, they
picking
love
their nose, they're
picking their nose,
their hands are in the dirt, which I mean,
Exactly.
on the other side of it is like germs, you know, they're building their immune system to be
right.
germs. So it's like, okay, well, but to keep from, say, a whole classroom getting sick with, you know, COVID, and then trying to teach them and keep that under control where you're not like, you know, I mean, I just,
I can't begin to imagine, but I know that I have some friends that run, you know, private preschools, and they have the preschools opened, and they're very, very regimented with any child that has a runny nose can't come, and they take the temperature. And I think that's the biggest problem, because a lot of parents, I know when I was a principal, and God love parents, because it's so hard. And especially if you're a single parent, or if you have that job that you have that boss.
yeah.
And, you know, come on, guys, give teachers, you know, a break, give parents a break.
Yeah.
But
if you have to keep your kid at home.
yeah, we used to have to sometimes keep kids. And let me tell you, I didn't mess around, because to me,
school isn't going to be babysitting the kids anymore.
no. And what if the kid had asthma? I had to call fire rescue a couple of occasions, because I said to my staff, look, I'm not having anybody die.
Yeah.
You know, and they don't have their inhaler, you know, let's get the kid, and we would go to the hospital with a child.
Yeah.
If we had to.
That goes right back to what you said at the beginning of the show about the schools are such like the heart of a community.
Yes.
And they're so important. I mean, people rely on that institution
Yes.
in their community. And right now it's been somewhat dismantled because of COVID, and now we got to rebuild it back up. But how is that going to happen? Just in the, you know, with the elementary all the way up to university level, right?
Oh, definitely. But more so with the little ones.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize is it's not the superintendent, it's the principal and the teachers that make it work.
Yeah.
They make everybody else look good. Because you take charge of your little kingdom, and you forge forward with your team, and you do whatever you need to do. When COVID hit, I started calling some of my colleagues, and they were there in their schools giving out breakfast and lunch, because what people don't realize is some of the children in our America only get their meals at school.
Exactly.
Only get their meals at school.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when schools are closed, I mean, they
weren't getting a meal. That was a big thing in Massachusetts. I don't know what they did up here in New Hampshire, but they basically covered the kids, and the kids did get the meals. They did have a plan in place. I mean, that's one of the things I like about Mass is they really do put things in place quickly. There's so many smart, brilliant people there, and they get the shit done, man. And then they have, which is great for other states, is they put this stuff together. And I don't know why other states haven't, you know, utilized and said, okay, what are they doing there? And it works, it clicks along, it's beautiful. And you know, use it as a template. You know, like look at states.
I know my superintendent.
Say, and you know, I mean, sometimes you can't listen to your representatives. You got to look. You got to do the research, dig, and find, okay, what states have the high numbers, or the kids are doing well, or whatever, and go look at what they're doing and use that template.
No, exactly. And I know that
right in your face.
I totally agree with you. And that's what our Miami-Dade County soup did. Because he was under the gun to open schools. And I think he got a lot of pushback. And, you know, basically he thought about it, because it's true. And I like the way that he did it. He's like, And Chicago just came on the ball, on the ball too. He's like, let's just open virtually and see where we're at on the, at the end of September. And then we'll make a decision. It's like, you can't make decisions with this COVID long term. You have to go maybe month to month.
Yeah.
Maybe you bring in the kids for just a bit, who knows, do it in waves. But then on the other side of the coin is, what about teachers that are single parents that are, they work, and then their kids, what are they going to do with their own kids?
Yeah.
So you have a whole dynamic here. The after school programs. I was talking to one of the directors of the, he's a big executive director of the Y here down in South Florida, that it's funny because when he had the program at my school, and all of a sudden he just shot up the ranks, and now he's running like the South region. He's a great dynamic guy.
Right.
But it's like, what do you do? Because parents rely on afters. I relied on the aftercare program for a while there for my kids.
Yeah, I have an idea. Like, I'm just thinking, like, if you're in a neighborhood and you know that you live in a neighborhood and there's other kids that might go to the same public school. And as a mom, if you organized where, even if you had the different age groups, say kids, and, I think back in the day, this is, the very old, like back in, Boston, the way they used to teach is the older kids would teach the younger kids.
I love that.
And they'd sit around, the dining room table, and everybody. And the thing about learning and when you teach something, and this is something that in anything that I've ever done is you learn it, but if you can teach it, then you really learn it.
Yes.
So as children coming up, as you get to, and then too, the self-esteem builds everything, because you're taking responsibility for somebody who's younger, and you're mentoring them, you're guiding them. But I can't help but wonder if there was something like that reenacted into this, where, say in the neighborhood, like your neighbor, they're safe, they're not sick or whatever, and the parents pick up, especially if we're all at home. But the challenge with that is, say Boston, is everybody's going to different schools down there. Like, there's so many options down there, and kids are going to different, like, neighborhood schools or town schools, or maybe they get their parents are shipping them across town because whatever. But I'm thinking, why couldn't there be something like that? This takes some serious thinking on getting together with the community, the parents, and see who's going to work together, and then putting the kids together where they do still have the social, but maybe at home within the neighborhood. Maybe you get like 3 neighbors that have kids, they team up, their kids do school at one person's house one day, and then the next day they go to the other person's house, and doing some stuff like that. And then you have that hybrid thing where they're online, they could be on TV. Like, I set up my Zoom calls. I don't know how teachers are doing it, but I can
Zoom.
I can see all my boot campers, on my TV, thanks to Teddy setting me up, like, doing all the technology things. But the kids would be able to do that, no problem. They're like, here, Mom, let me handle it, or whatever. They know how to set it all up by themselves.
I think that's a great idea.
And
I think it's a great idea. We have to think innovatively.
Yeah, and like, kids have theere own little laptops. You have your freshman in high school, and he's learning his thing. Meanwhile, little preschooler, he's sitting there, mimicking the big one, because he's like, I admire him. I'm going to be on my little computer and doing my thing.
There you go.
That's how kids will learn. And then if the kid needs help, the big kid can say, okay, this is what you got to do. And then they're learning all these other kind of charism, all the higher ideals too, that you mentioned at the very beginning.
Higher ideals. Instilling higher ideals.
And caring for one another, and taking
virtues. We need to bring virtues back into the school.
Yes, and they've been taken out for some reason. It's just all about the numbers. It's like, well,
let me tell you something. Let me tell you something.
All those standardized tests. It was like every time you turned around, it was ridiculous.
Before I left, all we did was we taught, but come on, it was crazy. We would have tests all, and that is not a way to grow future leaders, people, because you know what? We don't go to work and get a test every week. That's ridiculous. Kids were hating school because there was no more fun socialization.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important, you know, plays. Kids learn all these different dynamics. I mean, you know, I still had my play. I don't know if it's still going on with the principal that took over, but you know, when you do drama and plays and music and all the extracurricular, that's what makes a well-rounded child. Not testing. Absolutely. You know, not testing, but we need to see who's in the power play of education. I know lobbyists have a lot to do with it. There's a lot of money out there. And these curriculums, I mean, come on, the textbook companies make millions and millions and millions of dollars. So once, you know, you pass a new curriculum and you change it, everything needs to be changed. It's really, people don't realize the amount of labor intensive and money that goes into that.
And
guess who picks up
that work and have worked, right? Let's use things that work and don't change the wheel if it works, basically. But then if there's other things like technology now, computers, that's a whole other thing. But like, you know, add that in, but don't be reinventing the freaking wheel when it works.
Over and over. It's like that rat race.
You know, because somebody wants to be, you know, some sort of whatever achievement wise, but maybe that works for you, but doesn't mean it works for everybody across.
Well, education is big business, and we need to get the politics out of education. And that's what people don't realize. We need to get politics out of education, and we need to go back to the basics and get the teachers making those decisions, the good teachers making decisions for how the kids are going to learn. And the other problem with the unions is that there's a lot of teachers in the classroom that shouldn't be teaching. They should not be teaching, but it's really, really hard for principals to get rid of them because of unions, because of their due process. You know, there's a lot of things that we need to look at. Like we've been talking in our show, all these laws that have to go that have been in the books since the 1800s. Same thing here. Education needs to change. We need to look at those laws. And I'm not opposed to unions, but unions need to get teachers more money if you're going to do anything. Teachers need to make more money. They don't make enough. They don't make enough. And what they do is monumental.
I mean, they're responsible for, our, you know, who's going to be governing this.
Leaders.
They are the future leaders, you know, like if they can't govern themselves, how can they govern anything outside in their own life on the micro level and even on the macro level in their careers or business? You know,
exactly. And parents, you know, start speaking up. Start calling your school board. If your kid has a teacher that's ineffective, start that. Get everybody, because teachers shouldn't be in front of kids. You know, they passed a law here in Florida.
The kids know, right? The kids know what are good teachers. I mean, I remember, you know, good teachers and, you know, all of my good teachers, and then some really bad teachers that
you shouldn't be teaching kids. Some of them hate kids.
I can tell you a couple that I didn't learn a darn thing, and we used to make fun of them, you know, like all the kids. So the kids, you have to be in touch with your kid and saying, okay, what's going on here? And
well, you know,
why aren't you doing well in this class? You know, when you get the report card, that's an indicator. You know, sometimes
it's important, but Florida passed a law, and I forgot what I was going to say. No, it's okay. But it's really, really important that people understand that if you get a bad teacher in that classroom, it takes 2 years of a child getting a good teacher to make up the gap. And that's what's happening. If we want to grow future leaders and we want to level the playing field of poverty, of, you know, the only way out is through getting our kids a good education. It doesn't mean more programs. It doesn't mean fancy curriculums. It doesn't mean all these people getting on the bandwagon of the $600 billion economy here, because education is a huge, huge business. So let's take it and put it on the business of our kids and of growing these future leaders, not of special interest groups that are only there. And I could talk for another hour because a lot of times, you know, people pass laws and they're not the right ones. They're not the right ones, or they pass them for their political careers.
So
They
once
really,
again, we cannot
yeah,
be complacent. This is, I mean,
no,
he's saying this whole season of our Evolve 360, show,
right.
we're looking at the quality of our life and the lives of our children, and
Yes,
moving forward into these uncertain waters right now. We're
yes,
moving into a whole new age. And we want to make sure that we give our kids the best that they can, so that they can be prepared as adults to
mm-hmm.
navigate these waters, because I can't even, there's so much change, and I mean it's
Yes,
really exciting on one end. It could
yes,
be a little scary too on
mm-hmm.
the other, but I mean, I'm hoping for like a really positive, amazing future, and I know you are too, Shell, and
Oh,
we want to be a
absolutely.
part of
I
that. We
definitely
want to
am.
help bridge that gap with some of
Yes,
the things that we're planning to do, you know, as we move forward with our intentions, and helping, parents, helping business leaders, helping
yes,
kids, with some of the things that we want to teach, and how to navigate just yourself, and to be
totally.
and to become an amazing person,
Yes.
as you move forward in your life. So I don't know if you
And
had.
leadership starts with us.
Yeah.
And leadership starts with us, and we need to start doing that for kids. And who, you never know, maybe we'll expand in the future and, target this, but it's this. I'd rather become an activist because I'm very passionate about education, and I've been around the block.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we
to
need,
me, yeah.
educate, the teachers need that support. They need somebody who can speak
Yes,
up for them, that
yes.
are on their side, and get where they're coming from.
Oh
And
my gosh.
yeah,
So
and who will
parents,
listen and hear them and say,
yeah,
okay, these are the issues that we're going to be having with these children, and if we want to appropriately teach them, we need to have these tools in place, right?
yes. Definitely.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, education, and I say it again, has become extremely political. A lot of people pass laws for their own political advancement.
Mm.
And then guess who's left holding the bag? The teacher.
Yeah.
The teacher. And that school principal that has to make it work for her school.
Mm.
So parents, support your teachers, because
Yeah.
let me tell you something. All of us have a teacher that has touched and changed our life. No matter what you do in this world, no matter how much money you make,
Mm.
it doesn't matter. That one teacher changed your life. And my teacher that changed my life was Mrs. Hill. It was my kindergarten teacher.
Ah.
I was in Chicago because that's where we landed when we came from Cuba. I
Mm.
didn't speak any English,
Oh my goodness.
and I didn't. I was the little bully on the playground because everybody made fun of me. So, when you're in, she took me aside, and that woman, bless her heart, taught me how to speak English. She
Wow.
taught me how to pronounce. Yeah, sometimes I have word like Massachusetts. I can't say that word very well. Massachusetts, my Cuban comes out.
Yeah, right.
But let me tell you, if it wasn't for Mrs. Hill, I would not have the pronunciation that I have. And she was such a wonderful, wonderful teacher. I loved her so much. And you guys that are listening, you know what I mean, because all of us. Shell, who was your teacher that changed
You
your
know
life?
what? I have a list of them. I had Mrs.
Yeah.
Rottenberg. What a name, all right? And I mean, I just remember thinking that she was just a great teacher overall, because we were
Right.
in her classroom for every class, and she was just very animated, and she taught everybody really well. And then, and then there was Mr. Giles, who advanced me into a more advanced class,
Uh-huh.
for math, for multiplication, and then
Wow.
I cheated because I
Oh
really wasn't
my God.
ready there, and I was so afraid to tell my parents. And he caught it, and he said, maybe we brought you in a little too soon. And then
Oh,
he was real, and he talked to my parents. He was real nice, but I remember him, like when kids, do something wrong, your
right.
teacher has to know how to, take your hand and say, okay, it's okay. And
Yes.
and so you don't feel humiliated because you didn't succeed. And so I learned that, you know, from the way he was kind. He brought me in, he thought I was good enough to do that, but then he said, well, maybe we should be back here and you'd feel emotionally more comfortable. And he could see that maybe I knew the math, but I wasn't emotionally ready for it. And I was nervous to go in with the older kids and be in that level class.
But it takes a teacher, a special
and it takes a teacher to see that and not stifle. And he didn't, you know, like I didn't feel bad about it, which was,
right.
you know, like
He held your grace. He held your grace.
I could have been. And then there was Miss Dickinson, and she was an English teacher, and you have to understand, like, she was so cute. Like, she had like a beehive, like the white hair. I mean, this woman, talk about, I mean, I bet you if I saw her to this day, she'd probably still look the same and never age. And she'd probably be in like her 70s or 80s or something. But she was funny. She let us kids, when we're there, those like raunchy little kids, you know, like, and we're like, you know, little brats, but we're like, you know, in the back, you know, doing spitballs and stuff. And she's up and I was one of those kids doing spitballs. And she, I mean, like, she just would ignore it, but then she would have like the greatest drama classes where we have to do improvisation. And
I love that.
And we would have to come up on the cuff and do like some sort of thing. And I loved her class because
so much fun,
creative expression.
And learning should be fun.
And it was fun, but I was amazed that a woman of her, like, you know, she was just the typical, like, if you have an idea of what a school teacher looked like, it was her. And there's others that were completely amazing, you know, like just really amazing. You know, I actually really was blessed where I felt like I had a really good education and
I did too.
A lot of really cool teachers. And then there were there was a couple that weren't so great, and I'm not going to mention names, but I remember them, and they would sit up against the board and just rock, and then
oh my gosh, that's horrible.
You know, like, and he expected us. And this was when I was in high school, and you're supposed to be learning, you're finally getting into learning about the Cold War and all that. And I don't remember anything from him. It was like glaze over. And I'm thinking those are important times where a teacher,
yes, they are,
like excited about. I mean, that was, now when I look at all that happened during World War II and all that coming out of that, I'm like, those were some amazing times. And it's like, how could a teacher not be in there to, you know, like,
and they shouldn't be in front of kids.
Absorbed. You know, I think of Robin Williams. Wasn't there, like, I think it was him, or maybe it was another guy, you know, comedian who was a teacher.
Right.
It would dress up and put like crazy hats on to teach the kids, and they would go and do. And I'm like, that's very creative.
That's what learning is all about.
We'll learn and remember that.
Is all about.
And that's,
and you know, Shell, you mentioned something that I want to bring up to our viewers before we say goodbye. And that is that the foundation that we get as a kid. You mentioned that your teacher made sure that you didn't feel humiliated or you didn't feel shame.
Yeah.
That is huge, because how many of us have experienced that as a child, and maybe we haven't been able to process it, and we've shoved it down into our emotion pool. And then you're an adult and you're navigating your world through, you know, your career, your life, and things happen.
And you don't know why you might behave a certain way. And it
don't know why you might behave a certain way. Yeah. But guess what? We got your back.
Yeah, we do.
We got your back, because our next show is going to kind of share this with you, because it's part 2 of this education series. It's a 2-part series, Growing Future Leaders. And part 2 will be in our next segment. And we're going to touch upon that shame, humiliation.
Yeah, we're going to talk about school, career, business, and life, and the power plays that show up, you know, throughout, like maybe even on the playground, all the way up to, you know, maybe in your relationships, your significant relationships, and even into the career and the workforce place. We're gonna get into all of that.
Yes, we are.
You know,
so I've had so much fun talking about what I love. This was my vocation. It still is, but I'm doing it in a different way, and I'm doing it with you. And just parents, you know, thank you for bringing your best to our teachers, and teachers, thank you for making the world a better place. God bless you all, because teachers to me have a front row in heaven. They are very, very special people. And, you know, we need to honor them more. And we need to take politics. I'm telling you, we need to take politics out of education. Let's take some of that money that we pay lobbyists and give it to our teachers.
Yes.
Give it to our teachers, because they deserve that money.
They
deserve it.
They do. It should be allocated there.
Yes.
Definitely.
They work hard. Let's get some really good teachers in front of our kids, growing future leaders.
Well, it might even some of that allocation that goes to police departments, you know, it might, you know, that study that you were talking about, it might turn down that whole.
The prisons, you mean?
Yeah. Like, you know, because kids are getting educated appropriately, and then their opportunities, more opportunities come into their life.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned police departments, because I had a great team of police officers that would come and talk to my kids.
That's awesome. And the fire department coming in.
It's important, because a lot of times you have kids that are on the cusp of going in a wrong way.
Yeah.
And you know, it's important. We need to bring back these values of old world values of respect and of, you know, just people helping the young future leaders, mentoring, helping them, like that teacher that helped you,
and not living in fear. I think you know, the whole thing is, you know, when you're allocating funds to things, if we're allocating to say the police departments to, you know, put down crime, that's a fear-based mentality.
Right.
And we have to kind of bridge that gap and shift it to having a positive and saying, okay, what kind of children are we raising? Are we raising criminals or future business leaders, or, you know, future leaders and stuff? And it comes down to education. And so when we're looking at how funds are allocated to the educational system, we really kind of have to say, okay, what's going on here, and where are, you know, when we're thinking, our thoughts create. So, you know, which Shelley and I are going to be getting into even more of this. And it's like, what are we creating for a future? And we have to start thinking more, not fear-based thoughts that have gotten to where we are today, what we see externally out in the world, because of fear-based thinking. And we have to change that. And that changes individually with each and every one of us in our households, with our kids, and coming from a place of love, careism, these values that Shelley has been talking about, taking responsibility and teaching our children that, and then bringing it into the schools. And then we won't have that need for law enforcement being in the way we're seeing it today, as so militant and everything. And
well, it's a two-way street too, because people are inciting. I mean, they're doing, I don't want to get into that right now.
Yeah, no, of course not. But it's
all about respect, people. We've got to start respecting ourselves.
Yes.
And respect others, because I really believe in that. In that golden rule.
Yes,
you know?
totally.
It's so important. Respect.
We have to take fear out of the playing field and put in love and peace and grace and responsibility, and respect and faith, and all those higher ideals as we move forward into you know, the next phase.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, the 21st century. You know, that's where we're going, people, and we have to stay on target with that. We have to really raise the vibration, and that's.
And there's a lot of chaos out there right now, but we had to go through chaos to get to the other side. So that's what Shelley and I are saying. So let's raise up our vibration. Exactly. Let's get to the other side with all the virtues that we just spoke about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, anything else?
No, just thank a teacher. That's all I have to say.
Thank a teacher. All right. So thank you for joining us on Growing Future Leaders and Embracing Higher Ideals in the 21st Century Learning. And if you enjoyed the show, please go ahead and leave a review. We'd love to hear your comments, or if we inspired or motivated you, or if there's anything that you'd like to talk about in the future. We'd love to have, another show on this topic. And then remember to subscribe and download on iTunes, and you can also watch us on YouTube, and you can find everything on our website at evolve360show.com. So this is
Cheli Grace
and Shelley Devine with Life Unplugged, Raw and Real. But I know, right? Woo! And we'll see you on the next Evolve 360 Shelley Shell show. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Toodles.